Recently, there was a meeting between Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu, and Putin opened the talk with these words. I'd like to start with a blessing for the upcoming Chanucá holiday. It's a good holiday full of light that symbolizes the victory of the light over the darkness, and I hope that this will always happen in international relations. And recently we feel that there's a lot of darkness in Israel, and in Israel specifically, the recent darkness is the wave of the mega terror that we were experiencing recently in terror in Europe and other places, and here we feel the wave of stabbing terror here in Israel, and there's a lot of tension, political tension between the US and Russia and Turkey, and a lot of wars around the world, immigrants going in different directions. We see that the economical situation is not that great. We have refugees. Each time there's a new wave coming our way, a new wave of darkness, and the feeling is really that we're approaching more and more, we're approaching greater and greater darkness, a state where there is the increasing of darkness in the world. The darkness in the world is on the rise in Israel and around the world. Do you see the situation this way? That we're plunging into ever greater darkness? That's clear, because our world is working according to the ego that's constantly growing, and what follows is that until we come out of the ego, we will all the time go into a deeper and deeper abyss, and our situation will be ever worse in all aspects: economy, education, family, even the climate and so on. Sure, there are also radical changes in climate. It's only the beginning. Everything's still ahead of us, meaning all the evil is still up ahead. Many people say there were dim eras in the world. There were world wars, there was the Inquisition, there was slavery, there were severe plagues, and people say, okay, a wave comes and goes, and maybe this is how our world's going. And times change from darkness to light, and now we're in a period of darkness. Whatever has to happen will happen. Soon the time of light will come, and everything's going to be fine. Is there really something unique about the period, about these times, compared to other times in history? In the past, I was engaged in science. My profession is biocybernetics. These are the systems of nature and the general systems, both in a person's body and also in the world. And I also thought that. The truth is, the thing is, that wherever we don't know what to do, even if we see that the tendency is negative, but what can you do? We say, yeah, there are better times, worse times, and everything will pass. But from the moment I started engaging in the wisdom of Kabbalah, and I saw its point of view of the world, reality, a person in the world, how does a person develop, what is this evolution we're undergoing, who's propelling it. So I started thinking differently. It's not that there's a collision or that it resists science or anything, but it only adds to science the information that it lacks. And then what follows is that our world, which develops according to the general ego, undergoes developmental phases where the ego is constantly growing, developing more and more, in the still, and the vegetative, and the animate, and also especially in the speaking level. And when we undergo the development, when we develop according to our growing ego. And also, the reality around us is also developing, also, only not in the same pace. So we're undergoing different phases, and now the era of development that the wisdom of Kabbalah talks about came to an end, and our world, which is completely based and develops according to the ego being its root, as it says, I have created the evil inclination, an evil desire, a desire to enjoy on account of others, regardless who that is and how, which exists in people, and we see how it develops. This era has exhausted itself, and ahead of us are either severe, last, egoistic wars that either by them or through understanding, enlightenment, and education will understand that we have to cross into the new era, which will, its motivating force will no longer necessarily be the ego, but balance with nature, meaning the more balanced we'll be, the closer we'll be to nature, to the general system which controls our whole reality, not only Earth and humanity in general, but the entire universe. It's one unanimous system, integral system that includes everything inside it, including human beings. We, for some reason, when we research nature, we don't take ourselves into consideration. I research nature. I'm as if outside of nature, and we don't take ourselves into consideration at all. Karl Marx and Einstein were the first who started thinking about it, the first of the scientists that started thinking about it. Before them, of course, there were a person he doesn't take into consideration. Who is he? What kind of system am I looking, with which eyes am I looking at things? I have to know what I'm doing. If I'm testing something with some instrument, then first of all I have to calibrate that instrument. Is it focused? Is it calibrated? And so on and so forth. And then I check, otherwise I have no idea where I am. It's like an airplane in the air. How can it know? You have to balance it with Earth, with four directions, and so on. So, when we relate to our situation this way, the situation in our world, we as if don't take a person into consideration, as if a person is some kind of an ideal instrument that's constantly balanced, calibrated, and really has that he's ideally calibrated, and then what he sees is what he sees, and it's true. And this way we're wrong. We're big time wrong. So if we're talking about the still vegetative inanimate, then we're not that wrong, because everyone sees more or less the same. But if we're talking about people, or the relation, the people's attitude to still vegetative inanimate, meaning nature, there we don't see the truth at all, and therefore we're constantly at an ever-growing, we're simply increasing the ongoing mistake, where we're as if correcting the world, but it comes instead of balancing the person, meaning the instrument through which we check is corrupted, and therefore it shows us a corrupted world. Let's see the world as something corrected and calibrate ourselves towards it. That's a completely different perception approach. It's hard to grasp it. We'll not get into it, but I wanted to say one thing about it, that our approach to the world is incorrect, and therefore what's happening today in the world in our times It all depends on our balance and not the balance of the world. If we were to balance ourselves, then the world would have been balanced. And this is with respect to the intifadas and ISIS and each and every problem in the world. Were we to balance man, really calibrate him correctly towards nature so that he will be in equivalence of form with nature, then everything would calm down and would have worked nicely. So how do you determine, or what characterizes the darkness we're experiencing today? The darkness is a result of us not being connected and that we're using each other in a bad way. And the second thing is that this is how we also relate not only to human society but also to nature, where we want to relate to everything egoistically, here and now. I want to get what seems good to me, and I don't care at whose expense is it and what will the results be, and as a result we have all of our problems. So this darkness which we're experiencing today actually is felt, like you're saying, that this balance that it exists for many years now because the source of the problem wasn't treated right. Because the source isn't one or another problem, but the source of the problem is the human being. So there were dark eras, then enlightened eras, but eventually this wheel can keep on turning and nothing will be solved until we take care of ourselves, humans.